29-year-old Jake Mitchell sat alone in his sparse apartment in Portland, Oregon, holding his phone with trembling hands as he prepared to record what he believed would be his final message to the world. The Iraq War veteran had been battling PTSD, survivor's guilt, and treatment-resistant depression for 7 years since returning from his third deployment. And despite countless therapy sessions, medications, and support group meetings, the weight of his trauma had finally become unbearable. Before we dive into Jake's darkest moment and the miracle that followed, I need to ask you something. If stories about the power of music to literally save lives and the extraordinary lengths people will go to help strangers in crisis matter to you, please hit that subscribe button right now. These stories take weeks to research and craft, and your subscription helps us continue sharing the moments that remind us all that hope can come from the most unexpected places. Now, back to Jake's incredible story. Jake had served 3 tours in Iraq as a combat medic with the 82nd Airborne Division, saving countless lives while watching too many friends die in ways that haunted his dreams every night. When he returned to civilian life in 2017, he struggled to adjust to a world that seemed trivial and meaningless compared to the life-and-death situations he had navigated overseas. The hypervigilance that had kept him alive in combat became crippling anxiety in peacetime, and the survivor's guilt from watching good soldiers die while he came home created a depression so profound that getting out of bed required more strength than he could summon most days. During his darkest periods over the past 5 years, Jake had found an unexpected lifeline in Taylor Swift's music, particularly her songs about resilience, healing, and finding hope during impossible circumstances. Breathe Me, a deep cut from her folklore album about surviving when breathing itself feels difficult, had become his anthem during panic attacks and suicidal episodes. The song's lyrics about holding on when everything feels lost had talked him down from the edge more times than he could count. But on this gray February evening, even Taylor's music wasn't enough to quiet the voices in his head, telling him that his pain would never end, that his family would be better off without the burden of worrying about him, and that he had already used up all his chances for healing. Jake had made his decision, and he wanted to leave behind an explanation that might help other veterans understand that his choice wasn't about cowardice or weakness. It was about exhaustion from fighting a war that continued long after he had come home. "My name is Jake Mitchell," he said into his phone camera, his voice steady despite the tears streaming down his face. "I'm a veteran of the Iraq War, and I've been fighting PTSD for 7 years. Tonight, I'm ending that fight because I can't carry this anymore." He paused, gathering the strength to continue with words he had been rehearsing in his mind for weeks. "I want everyone to know that Taylor Swift's music, especially a song called Breathe Me, has kept me alive for the past 5 years. When the nightmares got too bad, when the guilt felt like it was crushing me, when I couldn't see any reason to keep going, I would listen to that song and remember that maybe I could survive one more day." Jake's voice broke as he continued. "But today, even that's not enough anymore. The pain is stronger than the music, stronger than the hope, stronger than anything I have left to fight with. I'm sorry to everyone who tried to help me. I'm sorry to my family who watched me struggle, and I'm sorry to Taylor Swift, whose music gave me 5 more years than I would have had without it." He ended the recording and immediately posted it to his social media accounts before he could lose his nerve, then set his phone aside and began preparing for what he had decided would be his final act. What Jake didn't anticipate was how quickly his video would spread across social media platforms, shared by veterans, organizations, mental health advocates, and ordinary people who were moved by his raw honesty about the hidden war that so many combat veterans fight every day. Within 2 hours of posting, the video had been shared over 50,000 times, with thousands of comments from people begging Jake to reconsider, sharing crisis hotline numbers, and expressing gratitude for his service while pleading with him to seek help one more time. But the comment that would change everything came from an account that most people assumed was fake. At Taylor Swift 13 had written, "Jake, I see you. I'm coming to find you. Please hold on." Dr. Sarah Martinez, a crisis intervention specialist at the Portland VA Medical Center, had been alerted to Jake's video by the hospital's social media monitoring system, which tracked posts from veterans that indicated immediate suicide risk. She was coordinating with local police to perform a wellness check when her phone rang with a call that she initially thought was a prank. "Dr. Martinez, this is Jennifer calling from Taylor Swift's management team," the voice on the phone said. "We've seen the video from Jake Mitchell, and Taylor wants to help. Do you have his location?" "I'm sorry, but even if you're really calling from Taylor Swift's team, I can't share patient location information," Dr. Martinez replied professionally, still skeptical about the authenticity of the call. "I understand completely," Jennifer replied, "but Taylor is currently in her private jet heading to Portland. She should arrive at the airport in about 90 minutes. Is there any way you could ask Jake if he would be willing to meet with her?" Dr. Martinez realized that this call might actually be legitimate when she received a follow-up text message containing verification codes that only someone with access to Taylor Swift's official accounts would possess. Meanwhile, Jake had been sitting in his apartment, surprised by the overwhelming response to his video but convinced that the attention would fade quickly and change nothing about his fundamental situation. He had turned off his phone to avoid the flood of messages and was preparing to follow through with his plan when police officers arrived at his door for the wellness check that Dr. Martinez had requested. "Mr. Mitchell, we're here because people are worried about you," Officer Davis said gently when Jake opened the door. "We'd like to talk with you and make sure you're safe." "I'm fine," Jake replied automatically, the response he had given to countless therapists, doctors, and family members over the years. "Jake, I know you're not fine," Dr. Martinez said as she approached his apartment door behind the officers. "I saw your video, and I want you to know that you're not alone. There are people who want to help you, including someone who's flying here right now, specifically to see you." "I don't understand," Jake said, confused by the mention of someone flying to Portland to see him. "Taylor Swift saw your video," Dr. Martinez explained. "She's on her way here, and she asked if you would be willing to meet with her. She wants you to know that your life matters, not just to her fans who love her music, but to her personally." Jake stared at Dr. Martinez in disbelief. "That's not real," he said. "Taylor Swift doesn't know I exist. This is some kind of mistake." But 30 minutes later, Jake found himself in a small conference room at the Portland VA Medical Center, accompanied by Dr. Martinez and a crisis counselor, when Taylor Swift walked through the door carrying an acoustic guitar and wearing the expression of someone who had traveled across the country for a single, urgent purpose. "Jake," Taylor said, sitting down across from him without any of the fanfare or distance that usually accompanied celebrity encounters. "Thank you for waiting. I came here because your video broke my heart, and because I need you to know something important." Jake looked at her in shock, still processing the surreal reality that Taylor Swift was sitting in a VA hospital conference room specifically to talk with him. "You said in your video that my music gave you 5 extra years," Taylor continued. "But I want you to understand that you gave me something too. Every veteran who finds strength in music reminds me why I write songs in the first place. Your survival, your struggle, your fight to keep going. That matters more than any chart position or award I've ever received." She picked up her guitar and began playing the opening chords of "Breathe Me," the song that Jake had mentioned in his video as his lifeline during dark moments. "I want to play this for you the way you need to hear it tonight," Taylor said, modifying the lyrics as she sang to speak directly to Jake's experience. "When the war inside your mind feels like it's never ending, when the weight of what you've seen makes breathing feel like pretending, remember you're still fighting, remember you're still here, and that means you're still winning, even when victory's not clear." As Taylor sang, Jake began crying in a way he hadn't allowed himself to cry in years. Not the controlled tears of therapy sessions, but the desperate release of someone who had been holding on to pain for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to let it go. "I don't know how to keep going," Jake said when the song ended. "I've tried everything. Therapy, medication, support groups, meditation, exercise. Nothing makes the guilt and the nightmares stop. I'm so tired of fighting a battle I can never win." "Jake, what if the goal isn't to win the battle?" Taylor replied. "What if the goal is just to keep fighting it, one day at a time, because your life has value that extends beyond your pain?" She spent the next 2 hours in that conference room, not performing or being a celebrity, but simply being present with someone who was considering ending his life. They talked about combat trauma, survivor's guilt, the challenge of finding meaning in civilian life, and the way that mental illness can make people feel isolated even when surrounded by support. "I keep thinking about all the guys who didn't make it home," Jake said. "Why do I get to be alive when they don't? What did I do to deserve survival when better soldiers than me died?" "Jake, survivor's guilt is real, and it's part of your trauma," Taylor replied. "But have you considered that maybe you survived because you still have important work to do? Maybe you're supposed to be here to help other veterans who are fighting the same battles you're fighting." It was during this conversation that Jake began to consider, for the first time in months, that his survival might have purpose beyond just continuing to exist. Taylor also connected Jake with Dr. Martinez and a specialized PTSD treatment program that used innovative approaches including music therapy, EMDR, and peer support groups specifically designed for combat veterans with complex trauma. "I want to try one more time," Jake said as their conversation concluded. "Not because I think it's going to be easy, but because someone cared enough to fly across the country to remind me that my life matters." "Your life doesn't just matter, Jake," Taylor replied. "Your life is irreplaceable. The world needs the perspective and strength that comes from someone who has survived what you've survived." But Taylor's support extended beyond that single intervention. She established the Jake Mitchell Crisis Response Foundation, a 24/7 support system for veterans experiencing suicidal ideation that combined immediate crisis intervention with long-term mental health care and peer support. The foundation's innovative approach included rapid response teams that could reach veterans in crisis within hours, comprehensive treatment programs that addressed the complex trauma specific to combat veterans, and a peer support network of veterans who had successfully navigated their own recovery journeys. 6 months later, Jake Mitchell was not only alive but serving as a peer counselor with the foundation, using his own experience with suicidal ideation to help other veterans understand that their darkest moments didn't have to be their final moments. "That night taught me something important," Jake would say when sharing his story with other veterans. "It taught me that asking for help isn't about weakness. It's about recognizing that survival is a team effort. I couldn't save myself alone, but with the right support, I could learn to save myself with help." The video that Jake had intended as his goodbye message became instead a powerful tool for veteran suicide prevention, shared in training programs and support groups as an example of how quickly mental health crises can develop and how important immediate intervention can be. Taylor continued to visit Jake and other veterans in the program, not as a celebrity making appearances, but as someone who understood that her platform could be used to create lasting change in how society addresses veteran mental health. 2 years later, Jake Mitchell was pursuing a degree in social work with a specialization in veteran crisis intervention, funded by a scholarship from the foundation that bore his name. His apartment, which had once felt like a place he was preparing to die, was now filled with thank you letters from veterans whose lives had been saved by the crisis intervention program his story had inspired. "Music saved my life," Jake would say, but it wasn't just the songs themselves. It was knowing that somewhere, someone cared enough about my survival to drop everything and remind me that my pain doesn't define my worth, and that even when I can't fight for myself, there are people who will fight for me. The Portland VA Medical Center eventually installed a memorial plaque in the conference room where Jake and Taylor had met, reading, "Hope lives here, where music and compassion remind us that every life is worth saving, especially when it doesn't feel that way." But Jake Mitchell preferred to remember that February night not as the time he was saved by a celebrity, but as the night he learned that survival was possible, when he stopped trying to fight his battles alone and started accepting the help that had always been available to him. The acoustic guitar that Taylor had used during their session was eventually donated to the Foundation's music therapy program, where it continued to provide comfort and healing to veterans who were learning that their trauma didn't have to be the end of their stories. It could be the beginning of their journey toward helping others survive similar struggles. Sometimes the most important interventions happen not in medical facilities or therapy offices, but in the moments when someone's cry for help is heard by exactly the right person at exactly the right time. Jake Mitchell's decision to share his pain publicly before ending his life created an opportunity for connection that transformed not only his own trajectory, but the entire approach to veteran crisis intervention. Taylor Swift's response proved that when someone reaches out in desperate honesty, dropping everything to provide immediate personal support can literally mean the difference between life and death. The most beautiful thing about Jake's story isn't that he was saved by a famous person, but that his willingness to be vulnerable about his pain created a foundation that continues to save other veterans who are fighting the same hidden war, proving that sometimes our darkest moments can become the source of light for others who are struggling to find their way back to hope.